In the next 60 minutes, we will bring to you the trends in engaging with doctors and the perspective of pharma leaders on different ways of engaging with doctors to keep the pharma brand alive in the doctor's mind. Without further ado, let me invite the keynote speaker for today, Ms. Ruchi Tushid, VP and GM, Walters Kluwer, GGM India. Welcome, Ms. Ruchi. Many thanks for joining in. Before I hand it over to Ms. Ruchi, I request our audience to keep posting your questions over the chat window. We will be having Q&A session at the end of today's discussion. With that, over to you, Ms. Ruchi. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. And first and foremost, good evening to everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. And I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to be part of this esteemed group today and look forward to an engaging conversation for the next 1 hour. While Krishna has already introduced the topic that we're going to be discussing today, I think it's important to understand that, for ages, doctor centricity has actually been the core focus of pharma organization. And they've done every bit in terms of customizing their offerings according to the interests and needs of the doctors. And then came pandemic. And I think we've seen a major shift in physicians' behaviors and preferences. It doesn't get complicated at just this level. The pace of these changes is also very varied and is different across different therapies and markets. Doctors are increasingly looking at new models of engagement, cooperation with the pharma industry. Few things that we've started noticing is, they're more and more demanding for data-driven, personalized engagement. They're also looking at how do we professionalize remote engagement through a well-managed, dedicated remote medical and commercial team. They're being very demanding and asking for personalized, modular, timely, and effective virtual content, which allows them to be absolutely up to speed on latest scenarios and medical content. And hence, it's becoming even more important for pharma brands to enhance their visibilities to doctors using relevant medical content. Looking at these interesting and significant trends that we're observing in the market, we thought what better than hear it from some of our esteemed panelists here today and understand how things have changed and what's the right way, what's the right approach towards engaging with physicians and ensuring that they're actually getting what they are finding valuable. So the topic of today's discussion definitely is engaging with doctors. What's new? What's the impact? And in this panel discussion, we will be focusing on first, what are the global trends in engaging with doctors and importance of credible scientific content. We're also going to be talking about the perspectives of different pharma leaders whom we have on the panel today on what do they think are the different ways of engaging with doctors to keep the pharma brand alive in doctors' mind as well as in their clinics. And last but not the least, how do we measure the impact of engagement activities that we're launching from a pharma standpoint to ensure that doctors are equally engaged with us? All this and much more in today's discussion. And without any further delay, I'd like to now hand it over to Professor Rajendra Gupta for an engaging discussion with the panelists here. So over to you, Dr. Rajendra Gupta.
Thank you, Ruchi. And good evening and welcome everyone. For all of us, it's a very interesting point in time. Whenever a global crisis has happened, one thing has happened. The industry has always rationalized, no matter where. So today we have the key stakeholder of the entire healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and is represented by the bigwigs, the key people who decide and define the direction. And we all know that the very definition and direction of the pharma industry is changing. We are very lucky to have today Anne Joel, who is the Vice President Global Communication and Brand Walter Kluwer's Health. We have Mr. Atish Majumdar, President Mankind Pharma. Mr. Atul Suri, who is the VP and SSBU Head Alembic. We have Mr. Saurabh Agarwal, SVP Business Lupin. And we have Ruchi Tushir, whom we heard for our opening remarks. So, given the way things are and the way the pharma industry is moving, firstly, I thank all my expert panelists who are the top-notch leaders from the industry. And I know that it's an annual closing, taking out time and being on this panel means a lot to us. And I'm sure for the audience as well. We have seen that the industry has undergone a paradigm change. The world is not the same it was before COVID. And pharma industry is the key influencer. We know it, and that's how we drive the entire direction of the healthcare industry. So how has the pharma industry been impacted due to COVID? One of the key things is the industry and the clinician interaction, and that also means the role of the medical reps. So how have your companies been impacted, and what have you done to cope up with that change? Atish, I'll start with you, then with Atul, and then we'll go with Saurabh.
Thank you, Professor, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I think when this virus, the small insidious virus hit us, uh, we saw a world play out in front of us, which we had never imagined, never conceived. And being in the pharma industry, I think, what we saw and what we witnessed is how doctors' practice completely change, how they prescribe completely change, how medicine is sold completely changed, how people learn, how doctors learn, we saw that change. And most importantly, we saw how we promote drugs also undergo a change. So multiple changes happening around us, disruptive in nature. But I think to the credit of everyone in this industry, I think the industry really stood up and saw that there are no supply chain constraints and people got the drugs which they were being prescribed. But having said that, we did realize somewhere in 2020 early on that from a promise to go digital, we had gone digital. It changed very, very fast right in front of our eyes. And when you look back at 2020, somehow it seems like it was a long time back, when you were hitting the dangling away, ringing your bell and wishing the virus will go away, But then it was just 2 years back, that is the size of disruption that we face today. Now, it changed multiple things. And the first thing is, if people worked from home in the pharma industry, because we were dependent only on the medical rep to go and promote our drugs, it was considered as something unethical. And comes this small virus, we are training our people to work from home. A tectonic shift in the way you lead people, right? And all around, we suddenly saw a flurry of digital assets coming into the market. Every market was still open. This was a pandemic related to the health, and we are in healthcare. So we were neck deep into it. And we saw all the companies, all our competitors, very respected companies, really, really get into a rush in creating digital assets, find out newer means of communicating to doctors and also to their people. Teams which was only heard about in terms of team spirit and what you wanted to build suddenly became your way of life. And when we saw this, at Mankind, I can tell you for sure, as a company, we realized that digital and pharmaceuticals, they go hand in hand. These are the two industries in India, or for that matter in the world, which needs to shake hands. And we had been studying this, and I can tell you for sure, like rest of the world, it caught us off guard when the virus came in. But and we saw all these things playing out in front of us. We decided to go slow first, because sometimes going slow is going fast. We acquired some assets. We went on social media. We did webinars and all that people were doing. But more than that, when you buy land and you want to build something, you first dig the land, right? And at Mankind, we decided to do just that. We decided to dig inwards, understand what are our capabilities, how agile we are, because digital is a long-term play, right? It's not something that you do just for the crisis. I think the wisdom of the entire team with us, our colleagues, our doctors, because we invited those days before we started anything. We invited doctors to come and address our team members. We heard so many people from across industries before we really shaped up anything. And we really dug deep and realized that we need to build capabilities. We need to build a belief system, because here was a team when we have the largest field force in the country. It was very important to build up a belief in the proposition. And we never said that go digital. We said, let's do digital along with the physical, because that's also going to come back. And we started this journey during COVID. Now, we launched Prana during that phase, which was the first WhatsApp-based chatbot for non-communicable diseases. We have more than 5,000 questions over there. Then we launched Drona, which was a teleconsultation platform initially, but evolved into a clinic management platform. Now, at Mankind, like I said, we like to look at things over the long term. And as multiple companies launched their platforms, we went to McKinsey, tied up with them, took their advice, and then launched Drona. And we still stay with the platform. In addition to that, we realized, that you need to connect with customers. You need to customize, with so much of information flowing, and no boundaries as far as WhatsApp was concerned. I mean, there was an overload of information taking place, and with very scant respect of what the doctor really wanted. I've always believed pharma is a set of conversations, and here was a situation where conversations were going left, right, and north. And then we thought it was very important to really shape the conversations. And so we tried to customize the way we connect with our customers. The kind of webinars which we started doing was built up from a very, I won't say a very deep analytics, but we did start using analytics to understand what kind of a customer we should invite into our webinars. We also realized that this scenario which was playing out really required the rep to customize his conversation with doctors, to personalize the offerings that he gives to doctors in terms of scientific dissemination. And again, we tied up with McKinsey to launch an app, which is now due any day, wherein we bought in next best action, Dr. 360, nudges, everything else, because this personalization is required today more than anything else. In addition, we are also working on a customer experience platform where we are trying to blend in the wisdom of clinical science and science itself into a storytelling manner. Because we also realized, that if there is something which appeals to human beings more than the physical self, is the video self, right? And with the advent of metaverse, very, very near now, maybe 5-6 years away, I think we have started on this CAP also. So just to sum it up, we saw tectonic shifts taking place in the way not only doctors, we behave, and in many ways, as we masked up, we unmasked, and behavioral change were driven big time. All our lives, we had worked for proximity, and suddenly we got into a phase, where you had to distance yourself, right? And the rep all along his life, he had tried to create face value, and now we were telling him to cover his face, half his face, and go and meet the doctor. So disruptive times, and this is where I think digital is going to be a big, big play. It helps you to customize, it helps you to scale, it helps you to respond very well. So I think we have, as a company, embraced digital. We believe we need to coexist with this, bring it, blend it in, and customize it as per the customer's demand. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you so much, Atesh. You enlightened us with how you disrupted the disruption. Saurabh, what was your experience, in innovating? Pharma industry is pretty innovative and it's really agile. So how did you can handle that under your leadership?
Thanks, Professor Rajendra. I echo a lot of thoughts which Atish has already mentioned. I think it was a unheard time, unexpected, and a lot of things were to change suddenly. But I think we had a little different journey because as an organization, we have already invested significantly in our digital capabilities in terms of interaction with HCPs as well as that of invested in digital capabilities little ahead of time. So we do have a couple of platforms already there wherein we were able to engage with customers and our medical reps and field staff through digital media. Plus, we also have created certain assets with which we were able to interact with patients, especially for chronic disease area. I think we have a award-winning chatbot called Anya, which has been in the market for quite some time, which do take care of patient queries which are there. But addressing the point of how did it change the doctor interaction and how has been the response of the industry, I would say for us what happened is in no time, maybe as soon as the last week of March happened, we practically huddled and figured out what we need to do, meaning how do we engage first people, because those are the biggest assets for us as an organization. And then how do we make sure that we maintain the continuity of supply chain first, and then how do we maintain the connect with HCPs in terms of making sure that they're supported, whether in terms of their treatment to their patients as well as in terms of any academic need that they have. So like behavior shift is not easy, so we tried first educating our team as to how significant or relevant it is for them to learn and adopt at a higher scale the entire digital stuff, and what are the etiquettes, what are the norms which are accepted in the digital media. Because in the classical media, when a medical rep interacts with the doctor, maybe the work norms and the expectation is different. But the same when it is done digitally, I think the expectation is very different. So you can't mimic exactly the same behavior, what you do in a face-to-face or in-person meeting versus what you do digitally. So we did develop some training modules, etc., for our teams first, and then made sure that they are at least understanding the context of how the interaction need to be done. And like what even Tish talked about, you can't be just bombarding a whole lot of message and make just think that it will spray and pray. Something will register. It doesn't work like that, because you'll have to respect the privacy. You have to make sure that it goes at the right time. It goes at the content is such that it's consumable. You can't just download the content, whatever you get, because one of the disadvantage of digital or remote connect is, you just feel you can push anything and everything that you have in hand without enough chewing done. So we wanted to avoid that for sure, because we know that like how we are doing, there are multiple people who may be trying to push so many messages to doctor which may not be relevant or may not be accepted so easily. So number one, training for the field staff. B, how curated messages are being given. What are the right time? What is the right frequency? All of that. And C, very important, we created some direct connect mechanism with HCPs at a company level. So while our medical reps were connecting with the doctor, we did opened up certain channels through which we, or at a central level, remotely, our teams were also able to connect with doctors from Mumbai. When if there are any requirement, because the situations are odd, we have never faced that kind of situation. And there were even occasions wherein doctor required help beyond professional need of treating patient, etc. And I think all of that we were able to manage through the direct channel that we opened for the doctors. Then there was, of course, in the beginning, there was a series of all this web meetings and academic sessions and so on. So everyone participated, and we did participated in a big way. But we were very sure that content will be the key thing. You can't just push. And I think Ruchi did talk about in the beginning that when you have digital as a media, what kind of content you push or flow is only what is going to make a difference, because everyone will connect. But are you meaningfully connecting, or you're doing just a checkbox? I think that was extremely critical. So maybe in the first week we did a very generic, I would say, content flow. But with the help of our analytics, and we are already using a couple of marketing platforms, automation platform, which flowed some data to us, through which we were able to curate, give that kind of content which people were really interested. Incidentally, what also helped us is a whole lot of HCPs, which were otherwise not easily accessible globally and in India. We were able to bring together far more easily, because practically half the world was at home, right? Whether it's in India or US or UK. And we found it an extremely good opportunity to make those interactions more meaningful. So if we have to get otherwise a good researcher or principal investigator of a key trial, it was very difficult to get time from them. But during COVID, it was far more easy to get them connected to Indian doctors and making sure that there is meaningful interaction. And the last thing that we also did is that we almost made sure that our people and all of us, train our minds that, this is not just one-time exercise. Meaning, once the shift is happening, it may be quite a shift. We were not, while we are not sure how long and how far it will go, but we are looking at the trend any which ways and thinking that this may accelerate the whole digital journey. So it was not for a spurt, but for a long-term journey that we told people to be ready with. And I think that helped us in the long run. If I look at even the outcomes that we saw in the pandemic years, we grew much better than any time in past. So the proof of the pudding was in terms of results as well.
Excellent, Saurav. And I think you made some very important points on the connect content, and also that, you leveraged the opportunity and was ready no matter what hit you. The bigger the problem, the more innovative the solution. So let us check with Atul. Atul, do you agree with our two colleagues? So you did something uniquely different, though the challenge was same in terms of scale and scope, but everyone handled it in their own way and came out.
So what I'll do is I wouldn't cover the points which are near similar to what both Saurabh and Atish did mention, and I do agree, and I totally agree with each one of those initiatives that they've taken. The initial apprehensions that were there with everybody in terms of the depth and the duration of the disruption, but it was very nice to see, and like you heard from both Saurabh and Atish, that not only did our workforce adjust, adapt, adopt, but eventually they absorbed the entire change so well that a lot of things started getting done which were desirous to being done but didn't get done earlier. And let me tell you what the positive changes were because of this disruption, so to speak. Apart from the Doctor Connect and the other challenges, of course, the positives I'm going to define in 5 Ds. First, very clearly, is digital. And I'm not going to speak much on that right now because all that there was to be said has been said by Saurabh and Atish. But digital was the first big D. The second big D really was data. Managers, field managers, we've spoken of medical representatives, but field managers are supposed to work with data. Do they actually do it? Were they doing it in the past? Very cursory, very rudimentary. But while they were sitting at home, they were then forced to actually read data. Data was sent to them from the HO. They were able to understand it, not just collect it, collate it, but interpret it. And therefore come to the third D of dissemination. They were able to disseminate extremely actionable nudges basis the data that they've analyzed to the field so that they could perform that much better. Getting us to the fourth D is distance. Now, distance sounds very funny. We're in a very remote, very dispersed, sparsely monitored workforce, really. But thanks to all of them jumping onto the digital bandwagon and in a very rudimentary manner, like Zoom and things like WhatsApp calls and stuff like that, at least they were able to reduce the distance. Otherwise, how much does field working does a regional manager do with the medical rep? Maybe once a month. A zonal manager maybe once in 3 months. But by virtue of going digital and using these means and platforms, they were able to connect with the workforce, not just doctors, but even with the workforce, and therefore cranked in a huge amount of efficiencies. And I come to the last D, and the last D is the most important over here, the Doctor Connect. Quite like what Saurabh said, I think the Doctor Connect actually got cemented totally during the lockdown. Here, the doctors who were initially just looking at medical reps as, hungry people so that they could, we could prescribe their brands and stuff like that. They actually realized that the pharma industry was here for the doctors. Every company, not just mine or Mankind or Lupin, every company worth its salt actually reached out to the doctors, sent them PPE kits, sent them stuff that they could practice, got them onto various digital telemedicine platforms, like how Saurabh very clearly mentioned. And I think that actually cemented. And today, the top companies actually have that rapport that's actually required with doctors so that you can collaborate together. And that's where I see the future going, because of the cemented collaboration with doctors, where the doctors have realized it's not just for the bottom line that the companies are coming to me, they actually care, and it's only with collaboration that things can work. So I think these were some of the positives that got thrown up during the pandemic, and we have marketeers who are listening to us, and I think they need to leverage each one of these. Where we've started off doing these things digitally with all the Ds that I mentioned, we need to sort of increase that going forward. That's all I have to add, because I don't want to go through the various digital initiatives. They've been very well covered by both the previous speakers.
Atul,
Professor
that's
Gupta.
very well put in terms of 5 Ds. And we have 2 Cs that also emerge, which is content collaboration, which finally is the crux of all we talk. And we have N who has joined us from US. Good morning, N. Thanks for joining in. Since we have the world leader in the content side, so I would like to know that what is the trends that you have been seeing in the medical content by doctors globally? I mean, any insights or anything to share with us, our colleagues in India?
Sure, sure. I mean, just for background, our company and our mission is very focused on delivering the best care everywhere. And we really focus on content that's going to drive knowledge or drive evidence-based knowledge or practice to clinicians so that it benefits patients. So one thing that has not changed is needing trusted content and really knowing it's vetted. If anything, that's probably increased, or certainly increased during the pandemic. I think we've got a legacy of doing that for many, many years. Not everyone knows that we have more than at least 6.5 million clinicians who use our health solutions every day. But what we saw in terms of consumption and what happened was normally, researchers will look at the scientific papers and derive what's applicable to their specialty. The doctors in front of a patient use one of our tools to figure out what they should do next when they're diagnosing or ordering tests or medications or something like that. But the process and the pace of that was so much uncertainty went through the roof. So what we saw was a transition to the best available evidence almost in the moment, because it was changing so fast. And if you think about it, at one point, we have a tool that's a clinical decision support tool that's widely used across the world by doctors, heavily trusted. And at one point, we saw more searches for COVID-related symptoms than there were cases in the world. So it was that community of doctors trying to figure out what was happening because this new infection was taking over. So one of the things we've seen with global content is just the pace at which you have to go through the breaking findings that are happening in research, distilling it down, which is really very complicated things, and then serving it up in a way that is consumable for a doctor or a researcher wherever they're practicing. So, I mean, we do that in a lot of different ways, but the pace at which we do it is so different. And we've always relied both on our internal experts who are medical doctors, but a large network, more than 7,000 prestigious physicians across the world, to inform what the latest evidence is in different specialty areas, whether it's cardiology or things like that. They also were dealing with their own crisis in their own hospitals and academic medical centers, but they were so committed to getting the information out there that they were also working round the clock and trying to surface the latest evidence for this serious situation with the infections and all the different waves. So I think the biggest difference was the volume of information went way up. The misinformation because of social media and news breaking every night, trying to figure out what was happening, created so much uncertainty that I think what we really saw the most was a need for really heavily peer-reviewed, super fast ways of pushing that to the point of decision. And the last thing I would say is, I mean, everybody's talked about digital. Somebody mentioned telehealth. With that, an interesting piece is, you know, they talk about webside manner. You know, whether it was a doctor or nurse or someone trying to treat a patient in a remote location, they had never been trained how to do that, right? So there's still, to this day, is an interest in figuring out how to deliver effective care when you're not able to be within arm's length of a patient.
And thank you so much. You brought this very important point of community and content. Since Ruchi, you are around, I would skip the queue to ask you one question. You know, as I look at the flow when Atish talked about the overload of information, you know, when I look at the adapt and absorb, you know, which Saurabh said, and then what Atul said about the 4Ds. So credible clinical content is very important. So are there ways that you have been seeing for pharma companies to look at improving clinical effectiveness of a doctor as an engagement strategy? Just your quick point on that.
Sure, Professor Gupta. And I think Anne did cover it to some extent where she was describing how evidence-based clinical decision options, which are highly trusted, the doctors are really happy when we provide them solutions that they can really address their challenges in treating the patients. And you know, there are many ways in which doctors can use solutions that can help improve the clinical effectiveness. Tools which help doctors in taking right decision at the point of care by offering relevant content at the time when doctors most need it. You know, evidence-based information which they can trust on CDS tools, ensuring that doctors have this tool when they're treating a patient improves the final outcome on patient care. And it's equally important to provide them options and access to information which they can trust and place full confidence on findings, recommendations, or, you know, grading, which makes them feel that what I'm going to be recommending out of this content is going to be truly helping me in improving the patient care. The other challenge that we've seen is, you know, practicing doctors also look at are constantly looking at for information on drug that they're prescribing and drug to drug interaction as doctors come across old patients, comorbid conditions, pregnancy, lactation, you name it. And if there is a way for us to give them solution that can offer right information on the drugs at the point of care, this can be so instrumental, whether in a remote scenario or whether in a in-person scenario, for doctors to be choosing the right medication for their patients depending upon the scenarios that they are dealing with. It doesn't stop here. Also giving doctors an access to medical content, which allows them to constantly update their knowledge and skills. I think some of us have already spoken about, when COVID hit, there was just so much of search and inquiries that was happening around how do we deal with this pandemic and what's the right way for us to go forward in treating our patients. Now imagine if we can actually aggregate, bring it all together from global sources, from global scenarios, from global experiences, solutions that can host and give doctors a chance to choose the right information basis all that collection. It doesn't stop here. Journals, books, which can be available on a single platform, segregated or for that matter, aggregated by the type of therapy we're looking at. This will allow doctors to be so updated on the therapy that's important to them at one single place. They don't have to go to multiple places and figure out which reference tool should I look at, how do I manage multiple applications, or for that matter, multiple journals, etc. So we're looking at, how do we kind of make it easy for doctors to be looking at this aggregated content instead of, going at different places to find that most important information on when they're trying to treat their patients. And I think with advent of digital technology, we've seen it's becoming more and more easy for us to provide that point of care from a clinical standpoint, from a drug standpoint, and from a referential information standpoint, to truly drive that clinical decision support a notch above what is happening. So I think some of these pointers do make sense as we have engaged with doctors, and providing them all at one go is something that we do see doctors value and help them in improving their overall patient care as they move forward with it.
Thanks, Ruchi. And one of the things, that in the course of my being in digital health, and more so in the last book I wrote on digital health, I make a very important observation. This is specific to India, where a doctor tells a patient after giving a prescription that come and show me the medicine before you go. And that's just to ensure that he has taken the same medication and the chemist has given him the same medication. Now, just look at the reverse that has happened. It's an age of digital patient, and digitalization at the patient level have happened faster than the industry or even the doctors. At one time, I quote that earlier the doctor would check, what patient bought. Now the patient checks what the doctor wrote. So it's an area of a well Googled patient. I will not say well informed. So they Google and check what the doctor has written. Now this brings me to a point to ask our dear colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry, where now patient is so much Googled. I will not say that they have probably the right information. How are you preparing the doctors to cope up with the well Googled patient? So I would go with Atul, Atish, and Saurabh.
Yeah, so let me just turn around the entire dynamic a little bit. Yes, well Googled, yes. Contrary to popular belief, I think the only person who's disgusted with this is the doctor himself, because he feels he's being questioned, his knowledge is being questioned. Fine. But I actually look at it as an advantage. Medical bloggers, medical influencers, they're actually very good. This actually leads to some amount of patient awareness. And therefore, two things emerge from this. One is, and I'm going to draw from my military experience. I've served in the army for 23 years prior to this. And one of the most important battle-winning factors is shaping the environment. And therefore, as pharma companies, what do we need to do? We need to shape the environment. Send out the medical stuff that is actually relevant. Get it out through digital means. We have marketeers, and I understand most of our audiences are marketeers. And therefore, it is super critical for us to shape the environment and do it through digital means, through social media. Send out the right messages, get the doctors to speak the right stuff. People should be aware. And it's not just about companies pulling out big CSR funds into, the famous Janhit Mein Jari issued in public interest, typically 24 hours before a new product is being launched. I think we need to move beyond that in shaping the environment. So I actually look at it as a positive. But to answer your question, Professor Gupta, what are we going to do? How are we going to help doctors with this? I think the voice of the doctor has also to travel to his patient population. And that's where we as pharma can step in to get extremely customized patient literature, patient education stuff, getting out, personalized from him to his patients. I think that would serve better. But if you think that we can do anything to reduce the anxiety of the patient, that he's not going to read up stuff before reaching to the doctor, I'm not too sure that's possible. But like I said, and I'll repeat this point because I'd like it reiterated, is we need to shape the environment. Let's get out with the right messages, the right knowledge, the right therapies, the right treatment options out to the public without looking at our products. I think we will be serving the cause a lot better. Professor
Saurabh,
Gupta.
thank you, Atul, so much. Saurabh.
Thank you. And I think on the point which Atul was mentioning about shaping the environment, I think he is fully right. Another important shift, I think everyone in the ecosystem need to realize that doctors as well as patient can't be behaving the same way like everyone did in the erstwhile environment. See, earlier information itself was a power. Today it is democratized. So if it was privy to few, then obviously that itself was power. Now it's not privy of privileged few. Now with access of internet and everyone having everything that's available. So you can't say if I have information and patient have information, it can be different. As much he can read a Medscape, so much can a doctor read. If it's a well-read science guy, he can still understand, make some inference. I'm not saying clinically he's trained to do that, but you can't stop somebody from reading or inferring. So with a democratized information being available, what's relevant now is the entire ecosystem need to evolve. One has to understand that dealing with the patient in the same old way may not work. So the whole concept of marketing, which for a very long period of time in India has been absolutely doctor centric, I think both the HCPs and the industry, I'm talking pharma or healthcare industry, has to move to patient centric approach of doing things. Right? So when I was, and I think Ruchi and talked about clinical decision support, which is offered by various platforms, and now even the consulting platform, and a lot of analytics is flowing, which gives a CDS to HCPs. I think those are powerful tools, and one need to understand that you can't just push the information and say to the patient, you have to just follow just like that, because I am saying it. One has to be a little more patient in dealing with it, have to really make them informed about what is right and wrong, and where is the boundary. Second is, while Google has a lot of information, I think somewhere down the line, the content being right is extremely critical, because today with the information overload, the only challenge which everyone faces is what is right and what is wrong. Is it trustworthy, not trustworthy, what to consume, what not to consume? And that's when some of the, I don't know whether at a policy level government can do, or maybe industry as a whole can come together. We need to make sure like how news is in some way, reviewed by somebody before it is casted to the masses. Anything which is very sensitive to health, to people in terms of, even COVID related stuff and so on. When during pandemic, everyone has become a doctor, and, people are saying you do take steam and take bath and do gargle. And I don't know, a whole lot of content. Some of it was scientific, some of it was absolutely not scientific. But if somebody can really screen through and then flow the information, even the Google will facilitate that way. So instead of seeing informed patient as a threat, we need to see first right information flows through, maybe a well-channel resourced ecosystem, whether driven through policies or through industry coming together, or content providers like Volta Kluwer or somebody. And second is accepting the fact that you can't now say that just because I have information and I'm a doctor, I have all the power. But need to move to the fact that patient-centric approach has to be adopted, and then train them well in terms of what is right and what is wrong. I think that's what my take would be on this.
Excellent, Saurabh, in terms of democratizing. So, Atish, I borrow the line from my friend Eric Topol, the patient will see you now. So, how does mankind prepare the doctor for seeing him, the patient, now?
So, my take here is questions asked, unasked, are both indication of doubt, right? And it is answers that create trusts. So an informed patient, if he's learning something about the disease or about the therapeutic options, will always lead to trust. That is the way I look at it. But having said that, I completely concur with what Saurabh said, that the information needs to be validated, and questions doesn't necessarily have to lead to actions, right? An informed patient doesn't necessarily mean he's writing his own prescription. He only has questions, right? And the best thing about the industry, which I've seen, is look at how doctors have changed over the last 25, 30 years. When we were kids, you went and asked the doctor, what happened to me? He would say, just take the pills and you're good, right? But today, a doctor will patiently sit and explain to you what has happened to you, what you need to do. And this has also got to do with the changing pattern of diseases. Earlier we had more communicable diseases in India, now more non-communicable diseases. So in my understanding, an informed patient is an opportunity to build trust on the solution. The second thing is, yes, we also need to be responsible as a pharma industry, as a partner to the doctors, that we need to take the responsibility of disseminating information, credible, scientifically validated information to the patients. Now, there are multiple ways which we can do that. Obviously, what Atul said would be my first option. We do this a lot. Lend credence to the share of voice of the doctor. Let him be heard for his own patients. And there are multiple ways. I won't get into that, but we do a lot of that. The other thing which we are seeing is the emergence of disease management platforms. And I think pharma in many ways today is really, really trying to build up information along the highway, if you might call it, because a patient has to live with this disease for a very, very long time. The last part is, when you Google, when a patient Googles, what does he Google for? He looks for the disease that he has got. And once he has learned about it, then he looks at what the solution the doctor has given. This is after the doctor has prescribed him something. And then he looks at the solution that has been given to him. Now, there, I think affordability, accessibility, and quality is a responsibility of the pharma industry, right? And because that's where you really go and increase adherence. Otherwise, it's all talk. The best way to be patient-centric is to make your products economical so that he takes the drug. Right? That's the best way you can do it. And most importantly, I think as a pharma industry, we need to increase the music, if I might say so, in terms of telling our patients, you need to adhere to the prescription of the doctor. It's good to have questions. It's perfectly all right. Ask as many as you want. But once the doctor has prescribed something, because he does that based on his clinical experience, his wisdom that he has acquired over practicing science over such a long time, I think that is a message which a company must facilitate. And I can tell you that we did an ad last Diwali with Amitabh Bachchan, where we talked about adherence and sticking to the prescription of the doctor. But having said that, it's good to ask questions. Thank you so much.
Adesh, I really like your points of being partners to doctors and the chronic diseases. And we know the number of chronic patients in India, which means living with the disease and managing it well. I think you made a very important point also towards the end in terms of adherence. I mean, I remember this number because having done a book on it, the world loses $637 billion every year due to non-compliance. That's a huge problem. And this brings me to something, that Atish made the point on being partners to doctors in a country as large as India, with the spread and the diversified reach. Each and company caters to thousands of doctors, probably lakhs of doctors, which is 100,000 in India number. How do companies, get the information right to them and fast to them? Because this is critical in today's time. How does companies like yours help the pharma industry?
I mean, I would say, we do it in two different ways, and we've evolved our approaches just as all of you have, because of the pace and the consumption choices of how doctors want information. What we can see is, with what happened in the last couple of years, what they're saying is they have much less time for that peer-to-peer interaction and advice between each other. So that gives all of us an opportunity to support them in a way they might have gotten more of that almost like advice from a peer. So one way we help keep them up to date is the actual tool itself, which is actually called Up to Date, is pushing live, immediate, real-time evidence-based guidance to doctors when they've got a patient in front of them. And we do see huge, use of that. That's where, we can see that, there are 650 million clinical topic views a year. And what's more important, that those are questions that they're looking up because they don't know the answer to them. And someone said, you have to be right. They want to be right. They want to make sure that they're making a choice that's going to benefit the patient. So when they do look at the evidence, they often, a third of the time, they change the decision that they were going to make at that course. So that's one really important intervention. As things change, obviously COVID was one of them. We push information to them. We have practice updates. We have in-app alerts and things like that in that particular tool. But we're also seeing that's like more, I've got a patient in front of me and I have to do something right this second. When people have a little more time, they're obviously going online. And one of the things we see is a huge increase in continuing medical education. We see it in two different tools, but pulling, somebody mentioned curated content, pulling that content together in a curated way and very specialized is getting great traction. We see a huge number of users in the tools that some of the portals and websites that we've created. And I think, someone mentioned data. When someone indicates they're a cardiologist and they care about these types of topics, and you can see what they're clicking on, and you have access to journals and other things, it makes it that much easier to serve up what they need, and they can use it. So those are a couple of the things that we do that we think are we're getting great feedback on. And based on the input we get from so many people using either our portals with the journal articles and the latest evidence that's breaking in some of these scientific papers, or the tool that I mentioned earlier, you get a lot of input from doctors on what they want, what they need. And even when there are gaps, right, they will say, this information is flawed, or we need more of it. There's a gap here. Like some of the patient-facing things that you've mentioned are certainly very, very hot now, and how to communicate differently, faster, and get the results that they want.
Thank you, Anne. So we have around 10 minutes, and I will quickly, ask. There are two questions, and these are real about digital, the change that I think when our colleagues in the pharma industry plan the next year, something that they will look. And these are the things that I've been very passionate about. One is digital therapeutics. This is something that is the present and is the future, and as I say, the biology drove healthcare, now it will be maths that will drive, which is data. And that's where digital therapeutics is. Software is a drug I wrote 7 years back. It was something that people were like shocked at, but I wasn't, because I knew that USFDA was doing digital therapeutics. So Atul, Atish, and Saurabh, 1 minute each, because I have one more question on that. We have many questions from the audience. I'll try to take as many. So if you're like brief, we'll get a sense. So what's your plan for digital therapeutics? Are you doing something on that?
Are we doing something right now? The answer is a big no. Do we plan doing something about that? Yes. Can pharma companies do it by themselves? I think the answer unequivocally amongst all of us would be no. So collaboration is where we need to go. We understand that the single best advantage that we as pharma companies have is not just the quantum, but the quality of the doctor connect that we possess. And that is our single biggest thing that we have. And therefore, most companies, and we spoke about this, Professor Gupta, backstage before this, it's all about mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
DTX is technology. What happened with the finance world? You had fintech coming in. What happened with education? You had edtech coming in. Health tech is there, but in a very rudimentary fashion. There's a lot more that needs to be done. And I'm just going to restrict myself to this, and I'll hand over to Atish or Saurabh, whoever wants to take this further in the interest of time.
Atish? Atish?
Yeah, sorry. You're on mute. Okay. I think this is a space which we have been watching with a lot of interest. In the last 7-8 years, more than 40 DTX platforms have been approved. Reset O has been doing very well. Omada has been doing very well. But when we look at ourselves, there is much to do over here. And the way ahead is only collaboration. When we look at it as standalone therapies, I think in India, there is a challenge to it because there is an issue of scale over here and of execution. But optimizing treatment, I think there's a big go as far as India is concerned. So my take is, it is the future. We're going to see a lot of it. It has always been in the prescription of a doctor because the first thing he talks to you about is awareness. And then what he prescribes to you is a lifestyle change. So that can be done wonderfully well with digital. And we are really studying this. And I'm sure as Indian companies go, you'll soon see something happening on this forefront.
Very well said. And Saurabh?
I think very interesting space, and I wouldn't like to comment ahead of time, but for sure there is a work happening on this side. And one thing that we are learning from the tech organizations are, which you rightly picked up, Professor, is science has driven so far, maybe biology has driven so far. Maths, AI, and ML may drive it for the next 2 decades. And I was studying some of the data that, or the papers that you have put in, the amount of investment with the Googles and the Amazons and the Microsoft are doing is way far higher than what industry is doing on R&D. So we are of course watchful for the trend. We strongly believe that in chronic disease area where longitudinal disease management is required, DTX will play a huge role. Already there are FDA approved products, SAMD and SAS, like you have for ADHD, there are product which is approved. India guidelines are getting shaped up, and looks like one is tech may become generic very soon. My sense is the know-how what you have for patient and doctor need to be leveraged, and I think that's what we are evaluating how we can leverage that. And second would be is more of a behavior shift. So it's not about getting a platform ready or a tech ready. There is a lot of behavior shift which is required, and that is something that has started. COVID has started that. So we are seeing consultation from in person to online. Now buying of medicine from a drugstore to a e-pharmacy and so on and so forth. So 2-3 pieces of value chain are getting into a digitized. I would not say digitized. And we feel there is a good headroom for DTX in India. We would be very keen to participate in this space, right? And there is a lot of action, I can tell you for sure.
Great, Saurabh. I think you, Atul and Atish made this point about behavior change. DTX has a major role on that. I know we are almost getting at the hour. So what I'll do is last question, because government has a key role to play in terms of catalyzing, and luckily this government is also investing. So we have the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. There's a substantial investment getting in. There's a National Health Authority that's dedicated to do this. With eSanjeevani, we already have 30 million consultations, which is the latest data. And this is just public. It will get more if you look at other things. Things are changing, So how is the pharma industry looking at leveraging this or contributing to this? Maybe a minute comment from each, Atish, Saurabh, and Atul. And then over to Krishna.
I think what we are seeing is a progressive shift in the ecosystem. And I think the government is doing a wonderful job in shaping up the national digital health policy and the ecosystem. And my submission here is that all of us needs to change, needs to add value to the ecosystem that we are seeing shape up. At the end of the day, it's what Darwin said, survival of the fittest. And I think what is imperative for pharma companies over here to use the scale that digital and this ecosystem offers to connect to your patients, and also use the connectivity that you get from digital to see that science is communicated in the best possible way with the evidence of science tailored into your communications to the doctors. So I think all in all, a very progressive environment being shaped up, which will only augment pharma's overall big goal, to see that we serve life.
Thanks, Atish. Atul?
Yeah, I was muted. So quite clearly, I think the biggest advantage of digital really is reach. The second biggest advantage really is care at the moment. It's care for all. And Ayushman Bharat, or whatever you may call it, or even just normal digital initiatives, is all about that reach. And therefore, where do I see pharma companies coming in? I think we should assist in stage one, assist the government mission in this. I do notice that while there are a lot of 10 states have been covered and all, but interestingly, those states of the Northeast which actually need this reach aren't there. Can we, as CSR activities, step in to assist in this e-Sanjeevani approach? Are aspects that we need to, because we're a pharma industry. We need to think just beyond the bottom line. I keep saying this. And where can we step in? We can step in with our CSR. We can step in with collaborating with the government in ensuring, registries of health care professionals to the entire system. That willy-nilly will get you the reach, and that willy-nilly will also get you the business at the end of the day. So I think a very pointed answer to your pointed question as to what pharma industry needs to do, I think we need to do a little more in ensuring a greater success to eSanjeevani and all the digital health initiatives that the government is taking, really.
So nice to hear, Atul, that. Saurabh?
I think very quickly, One of the way I feel we can, help this NDHM is every company is investing a lot or some portion of it in, creating some digital platform. I think if standardization is coming the way, as we see, there is a sandbox environment provided by NDHM for various platforms. It may be very relevant that right at the, creation stage, you start adopting to that standardized sandbox environment. Because if we do that over time, once the integration happens and interpolarability of the data, which is the eventual mission and UHID being created for every citizen, it will almost be like an Aadhaar for health. So the way we look at it is that whatever we are creating right now as a platform or a provider or a consulting, let it follow the standard guideline. And there are good sandbox environment being provided at NDH. If you read through, you'll find out so many tools which are ready, handy, available. So instead of developing a standalone thing which doesn't talk to each other, maybe good, if you keep a little open system, keep it a little more collaborative and, one system talking to each other, so that at a time when there is a standardization required, we can quickly, swiftly move as a country to a standardized system and data can really flow in for a patient from one doctor to other. And registry will just become handy, like how NHS has data for UK, so can India have, because we have a tremendous number of patients. It just requires standardization and creation level, everyone to be open, because instead of keeping it like a copyrighted stuff, just thinking that it's only me may not work. So I think that's the approach we would like to keep as we move forward.
Excellent, Saurabh. As I blank on the name, given my aging, but as someone said, the future is already here, but it's unevenly distributed. So that's the situation right now. There's a digital divide. I think as Atesh and Atul mentioned, that digital divide should not be among the providers or industry as such, so that, the healthcare seekers don't face the digital divide. So the point that Atesh very strongly conveyed, which I think is a parting message I'll take, that we all have to change. That's a fact. Second, what I think Atul said is that let's make the current program a success, means adopt digitalization and plan for it. And as Saurabh ended saying, standardize so that there is interoperability. I think it's an excellent platform, and the discussion we had, I would love to continue it for 1 hour, but I'm afraid we are at top of the hour. We are done with time. So I'll hand it over to Krishna, but it was a lovely conversation. Thank you all. Krishna.
Yeah, it was an enlightening discussion, that's for sure. Like, we have received plethora of questions for this conversation. Professor Rajendra would request you if you can just cherry pick a couple of questions, keeping in mind that we are short of time.
Okay. Thank you. I was actually, trying to stick to it because I know that we asked them for 1 hour. So I'm going to, look at and ask you this question is that if you look at digital transformation, how are doctors perceiving it? I'm sure in the last 2 years you had, many conversations at the senior most level with the so-called A level or, the top clinicians. How are doctors perceiving digital transformation? And what are they expecting out of you? Atesh, Saurabh, Atul, anyone, please jump in.
I think I would go for this. And in my sense, it started with a little hesitation. But now over 2 years since the pandemic is there, every single soul has adapted it. People who would have not touched laptop through their life in last 2 years have learned how to do a digital consultation or a teleconsultation. So I think they are far more faster in adopting than what we thought of. We were underestimating what HCP can do. And I think it has been fantastic. And they're saying by themselves, no need to travel and I can do my consults here, even for the scientific content and meetings. People are happy seeing in their at the luxury of their home or clinic and say, okay, if it's a 1 hour job, why not do it in the clinic or at my home at the luxury of time? So I think they have adopted fantastic. It's far better than the expectation that the industry had from doctor. We underestimated them, I would say.
I think Saurav has hit the nail on the head. There's no doubt they adapted very well, much better than our expectations. And I think there's a huge leaning in towards digital. And like it saves time, it is convenient, and you can do so much more. So I think as much as there is a desire to reclaim our lives, there is also a great value addition coming from the digital transformation, which has definitely taken place, not only for doctors, but I think for all of us. So nothing much to add to what Saurabh said. I completely agree with what he just said.
Thanks,
So
Atesh. Atul?
I'll do the easy thing and say, yes, I agree with both of them. But definitely, contrary to popular perception that there was this huge digital divide, my sense was it was not so drastic. Whether it was the rural areas where the doctors were, they took to it. Whether it was just talking on a dumb phone to their patients, they had to serve the patients. The patients needed attention, and they hooked on to whatever digital means they had. And therefore, there was a digital divide, yes, rural, urban, available, not available, but not that dire.
Atul, I agree. In fact, I ran a study around 127 countries, and in India did a study. We saw that adoption had increased over time, but COVID fast tracked that. And now
Fast.
this is something that's probably, as you all say, is going to last. It's not going away.
No.
But looking at the way people have adopted and stuck to it, now we are almost like 2 years. As they say, anything you do for 21 days becomes a habit. It's almost 700 days. So, do you think that at some stage this interaction through digital platform with the doctors and the content that you're getting now live and validated thanks to great providers, at some stage do you see the redundance of medical representatives?
Um, Never. I don't think so. Not in the Indian domestic pharma, the way things operate here in our country. I think the
Mhm.
medical rep will remain. The way he does his job may change. The way he conveys things to the doctor or carries, updates and up to dates to the doctor may change. But I think it's very important to have the medical rep. And we've spoken to a lot of doctors, and a lot of doctors are happy that the medical reps are back in the chambers interacting with them.
Okay, Saurabh.
I think I concur with Atul. Medical reps are here to stay. Maybe the type of job they do may change. And maybe the expectation from them will change. So the capabilities that we look forward for a medical rep right now versus what we may require 5 years down the line or right now may be a little different. So maybe the kind of grooming, training, development required may be different, but they're here to stay. And the only thing is they may be able to do a different kind of job. So currently in the entire disease management, we are right now stuck at doctor-patient, a doctor and interaction for a medical rep. Who knows, in the disease management, some amount of disease management job is also handled by them. We are right now undermining. Who knows, it's a counselor job or a coach job that can also be expected out of them. So that may be a sort of future extended job roles for medical rep. For definitely, I believe the job is here to stay and much more
Adesh.
enriched.
Yeah, Adesh, you run with probably one of the largest networks of medical reps. Are you seeing reorienting the roles?
No, we believe in people and we believe in the power of human interaction. As long as doctors are going to be humans, the roles are always going to be there, right? A relationship is a function of both rational and a rational element and an emotional element, right? And look at us, when we were doing so many things from home, how keen we were to meet another human being, another friend of ours. I think that is never ever going to work. But yes, all these changes that has come into our lives is only going to add value to that interaction that we have with our friends, with our colleagues, with our doctors. And yes, I think with changing times, doctors have changed, and we could. I'm sure you saw that during the entire conversations. And I think reps will also have to change their roles a lot, and they will have to do additional things. As pharma goes beyond the pill, I think people have to go beyond the role and start looking at themselves as educators and as real partners with doctors, which I think is something which is in transition already, or in process, if I might say so. But
Excellent.
medical reps are going nowhere, that's for sure.
Thanks, Satish. I know that I was seeing messages from people who are attending are now in national positions, and I've known them as medical reps in 90s. In fact, Mr. Arneja used to be a medical rep, best Changam and Mankind both. And what they have built is the world's best companies. So I understand the importance of what the vision medical rep carries, not a medical rep only. I have last question, which is like key parting shot for everyone out there. So as heads of one of the largest companies, in the world probably, as India is the pharmacy of the world, and you all actually supply to the world. Uh, how are you looking at investments in technology in the year that is coming? Just a quick response.
Uh, I think what we are seeing, is the blend of technology and medicine. MedTech is something which is looking like it's going to grow at 35% CAGR for the next 5 years at a global scale. Plus, we are going to look at our patient. I think point of care diagnostics is growing. Uh, home care, we have seen grow in oncology, but we are seeing it pass on to multiple areas. And during COVID, something happened was remote care of patients actually manifested into play, right? So with all these things happening around us, I think technology is something where every company has to invest in with a long-term view, keeping in mind technology comes with debts, and you'll have to build that up into your P&L. That's the trick, you know. I think every company worth its salt is investing in technology, but the appetite that you have for a long-term gain, the appetite that you have for risks, and the appetite you have for writing of long-term debt, technology debt, is something which is going to be detrimental for any company. And I think mankind has that appetite.
Thanks, Atish. Atul?
Yeah, so I quite agree with what Atish said, and it's only technology that's actually going to bind and integrate the three major things of, you know, consultation, diagnostic, and the final dispersal of the medicine, what we're all, the three of us here are interested in. Without technology, that's not going to scale up. If you want to speed for scale, you have to get onto technology, you have to invest in technology. If you don't, you're not just going to miss the bus, you're going to get run over by the bus.
Thank you, Atul. Saurabh?
I think goes without saying, big time investment required for technology. And I feel not at just front end, because front end is one, but we need to do a significant scale up at the back end. So manufacturing requires a significant tech investment, right? There is a whole lot of automation happening. We know our API got, you know, severely constrained when we had the China issue. So I think we need to invest on the capabilities of tech to develop API at a large scale. You know, we still have more than 65% dependence on API to other countries, which is not very sustainable model for a long term. You know, we call it ourselves a pharmacy of the world, but we still are dependent on somebody else. So I think that's something, that tech requirement is extremely there. Other than the front end, the next thing I look at is the supply chain automation. So that's again a huge area where there are leakages. It's not efficient. We waste a lot of resources. We are practically learning, you know, doing supply chain company by company, which is like such an inefficient way of, you know, doing a movement of goods. So somewhere down the line, I feel there again will be a good tech investment, which will make sure it's a streamlined, you know, operation in terms of supply chain. And the front end goes without saying. I mean, you have to evolve in terms of technology investment for people and for making them, you know, empower them with enabling technologies in terms of doing the roles well.
Thanks. And your last parting message, 30-second for the audience.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, we've seen the power of evidence-based medicine put into practice, the breaking medical science. The big change that we're hearing a lot from customers is in workflow, and that's changing with the digital health technology. They're looking to kind of create our content and push it out in lots of different ways. So I think we'll see more of that, both on the provider side and on the patient side, how people want to deliver and consume that deep science-based information.
Thank you. Ruchi, you have the last word, and then pass to Krishna.
Sure. I just wanted to say that, you know, it's so interesting to hear everybody's perspective and the tectonic shift that we've seen in the pharma industry and the associated customers as well. I love the fact that everybody understands the importance and the need of technology. And it's just not to serve your customers, but even to actually internally make your processes so relevant and so digitally transformed that you're literally addressing everything that your customer needs at that particular moment. But I think a lot more that we could discuss and continue to go on. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and thank you so much, Professor Gupta, and everybody on the panel to have such a meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Ruchi. Before I pass through Krishna, I must say hats off to you, Atish, Atul, and Saurabh for showing us the direction. It means a lot when it comes from leaders like you, and we hope that your support will help digitalize the healthcare industry and benefit the patient at the end of the day. That's the way we are looking at. Thank you. Over to Krishna.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
Real pleasure.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this enlightening conversation today. And of course, it was insightful, enlightening, and so many messages to take home today. And thank you, delegates, for joining this session curated by ethealthworld.com. Thank you so much once again for joining. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.